Welcome, everyone. I'm Coach Nesci with Shooting School Basketball, and you are watching Meet Your College Hoops Coach. We chat with college coaches to bring you an inside view into their basketball programs and their schools. Today, we are happy to have with us Coach Max Sass, the head coach of Pratt Institute. Coach has just completed his third season. Prior to his tenure at Pratt, Coach worked as an assistant coach at Bard College and at Wesleyan College. Coach, good afternoon, and thanks for being with us today.
Oh, my pleasure, Coach. Thanks for having me here today.
Terrific. And so, Coach, could you give us a description of Pratt?
Absolutely. Pratt is a really, really special place, and I'm sure every coach has said that. We're inherently biased, but I think that one of the most unique things about Pratt, and I say this because I have some experience. I was born in New York City, then I grew up in the suburbs of northern New Jersey, and now I'm back working in Brooklyn. And for me, I've always struggled to figure out the perfect blend of that city environment, but yet that kind of safe haven of the suburban feel. And it clicked to me when I got to Pratt on the first interview, even before I was hired, because we're in Brooklyn, which is obviously one of the coolest places in the entire world, just in terms of the way it's growing and the way it's become really hip and the different things that are popping up there. But we have a 25-acre gated campus. So we get that campus feel. We have a grassy quad in the middle of Brooklyn. We guarantee 4 years of housing in the middle of Brooklyn. But yet you step right outside the gates and you're in downtown Brooklyn. You are less than 10, 15 minutes walking from the Barclays Center where the Nets play. You know, you hop on a subway and within 10, 15 minutes, you're at the 9/11 Memorial. You know, go up a little further into Manhattan, you're at Times Square, MSG. So we really have the perfect blend of city feel and campus life for what is just absolutely outstanding academics as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about more too.
Yes, and in talking about that, then, Coach, I know Pratt's a little different, and the programs. If you could talk a little bit about the academic programming and what's offered at Pratt.
So Pratt is really unique academically, and we are, I believe, the only ACAD school, which is, I should probably have studied up on my acronyms, but it's basically architecture, art, design schools. We're the only NCAA Division III ACAD school. And what that means is that we excel in a number of different majors that you're not going to see at a lot of other schools that we compete against. So for us, for example, architecture, we are amongst the best architecture schools in the entire world. Pretty much any ranking you find, U.S. News and World Report, designintelligence.com, et cetera, we will be the number one architecture school amongst NCAA Division III schools, and we'll be in the top 5, period. What that has spawned for us is an amazing program, which is construction management. And basically, we found that we had these incredible minds in this design game, but they wanted to figure out a way to find the business side of that. And so what they did is they created this construction management major about 12 to 15 years ago. And it's actually currently the number 1 ranked construction management program in the entire country based on mid-career salary figures of graduates. And what it does is it combines the architecture side of construction and a little bit of the engineering side, and it brings it all together with essentially a business management degree. So there is a degree of technical knowledge, which is about 30% of the curriculum. 30% of the curriculum is math and science, and then about 40% is going to be your traditional business studies, economics, things of that nature. And that's become really popular. And frankly, it's all encompassed by what Pratt calls the creative thought process, which some people like to, some people want to put it in a box and say it's only, painting and design. But it's not just art. It's this idea that creativity, human creativity, and the creative thought process cannot be replicated by machines. And as we enter a time where machines and robots and artificial intelligence are able to do more and more tasks, if you have this creative thought process that can't be replicated, you have the ability to constantly pivot and adjust and be at the forefront of your field. And I think Pratt does an amazing job of training that in their specific majors and in general.
Yeah, very interesting, Coach. And I think, all that you pointed out, I think if when we have, our players, their parents listening in and getting some of this information, I think the question would be, wow, that sounds pretty neat. How come maybe this is something we didn't know about? But the answer to that, and from where I'm sitting, is that I'm going to ask you to speak on this in a minute, Coach, is that you are presently in the phase of making a transition into NCAA Division III basketball. And I guess, what would you say it would be prior to that? Would it just be club, Coach?
So we were actually a varsity team, but we competed under the USCAA umbrella, which is a NCAA distinction. But I think that your point is very valid, Coach, in that, even though we were varsity, we were not a huge presence on the recruiting circuit. We weren't doing things like that to get our name out there. And a lot of the credit has to go to my boss, our director of athletics and recreation, Walter Ricard. He comes from a basketball background. He took over at Pratt about 5-6 years ago. And he came in with this vision that we're going to do things, and we're going to do things the right way. We're going to go into the NCAA. We're going to play under their banner. We're going to follow their rules. We're going to adhere to their guidelines. And what it's going to allow us to do is obviously compete at the highest level when we're eligible next year to compete in the NCAA tournament. So we have one more year where 2 more years in our transition process. We've been approved by the NCAA. Right now, they're just monitoring us to make sure that we're following the rules and hitting our minimums, and we're doing great. We're perfectly in line with all that stuff, and we're competing against NCAA teams. Next year, over 90% of our schedule is going to be against NCAA Division III teams, and it's going to be 100% going forward beyond that. So our goal when I took over is to get our brand out there and then to show we can compete on that level. And I think we've done that. We've won NCAA Division III games this past year. We actually had the best season in 41 years of program history this year, winning 15 games.
Terrific.
So not to jump the gun, but yeah, I think our name wasn't necessarily out there because we weren't doing athletics with as much vigor and passion and aggressiveness as we are now. And, it's funny because even before this was all happening, we used to be terrific. We used to be NAIA Division II, and we had scholarships back in the 50s and the 60s, and we won soccer national championships. We have the banner. We had a guy who scored 1,200 points in his first 2 years at Pratt, and then left to join the AN1 mixtape tour. Half man, half amazing. So there is a ton of athletics history at Pratt. It was just under a different umbrella. So I'm really excited to sort of be creating our own history right now to add to that.
Sure. Coach, as we're gonna talk a lot more, I think, about recruiting and kind of where you are with that and your goals. But just to finish up kind of more on the profile of the school, two things. One, what's the size, Coach? What is the size of the school? And then secondly, as you mentioned, housing, what options regarding housing? Is it on-campus housing, or is it, housing, but like in the area that you offer, like off-campus housing that is in proximity to your campus?
Yeah, awesome question. So to start with the second part of it, the housing is on campus or dorms. Actually, as part of our guarantee to give housing, we actually had to buy out apartment buildings and extend our campus across the street. And so we've created a couple other things there as well. But the housing is going to be on campus. They're not putting you a couple blocks away in different Brooklyn neighborhoods. We have townhouses, which are, I'd love to live in a townhouse. They're beautiful. For our upperclassmen, mostly seniors, we have apartment-style living for our sophomores and juniors, along with traditional dorm options. Freshmen live in freshman-only housing, which I think is great because it's an awesome way to transition into school without having to be next to a 22-year-old senior who's living a different lifestyle. You're going to be with other people going through the same first-year experience. And then in terms of size, we're actually bigger than I think a lot of people think. We're at about 3,600 undergraduates plus another 1,500 graduate students. So it's a little bit bigger than people think of us. But having said that, they do a really good job keeping class sizes small, 9-to-1 student to faculty ratio. And we're growing just in terms of our different ratios. Right now we're at about 70% female, 30% male student body population. And that sort of just changes year to year based on age and enrollment and things like that. But yeah, we're as big as we've ever been, and it's a good thing.
That's great. Great, Coach. So kind of segueing into recruiting, what do you find, Coach, is kind of maybe your biggest challenge in recruiting, at an institution like Pratt?
Definitely. I think that, the first thing that I think is the biggest challenge at Pratt, and perhaps is the biggest challenge everywhere, but for me, I want to find someone who fits Pratt. And for us, because we are such a high academic institution, and because we do require you to apply to a specific major, it can be a challenge for us just to look at a pool of 10 kids and say, okay, we think 7 of them are talented enough, or 3 of them are talented enough, whatever the number is. But then when we go to those 3, we want to make sure it's a fit, because we don't want to put a square peg in a round hole. Because ultimately, that's why I think transfer numbers are through the roof and attrition rates are so high. What we want to do is bring in the right guys, even if we're missing out on a talented guy, because the fit is more important. We'd rather have 100% effort of someone who wants to be there rather than someone who's got 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out the door. That's really important to us, and that's been the biggest challenge, is sort of just assessing who fits it, because I think that we hear nowadays a lot of people think they want business or they think they want this, but when they then further look into our programs, the people that really do take the time to do that, they find out that it actually fits them pretty nicely. Because construction management, for example, you're getting that business management degree, but you happen to now have a specialty that's going to make sure you're going to be employed for your first year out of college, and then the next 30, 40 years out of college, as opposed to this sort of more general degree where you're like, I hope I can take it this way, or I hope I can take it in that direction. And that's really applied really strongly to us. And, we have people who want to do journalism. And so within our writing program, we have some really strong graduates. We have some people who want to do fashion design, which has been awesome. We've had people who love basketball sneakers, and they want to design sneakers, so they'll work on industrial design. And it's certain things that aren't necessarily promoted within the specific name of the major, but it's there. We have a ton of flexibility within our critical visual studies major, which is essentially a combination liberal arts, create your own major with the heavy focus on independent thinking and research. And again, those things, I think people need to be willing to do the research. And so that can be a challenge sometimes.
If we talk more about the basketball skill sets, Coach, you certainly appreciate and totally agree with you on the fit. If we're not bringing in the student athlete that fits what our school, our college, our university, our institute is about, then their level of success and our level of success is going to be, lessened. So
exactly.
So now you found, the kids that are a right fit, and you have a pool that you're dealing with. When you talk about the basketball skill sets, what would you consider? How would you verbalize what a quality player is for your program? In whatever terms you would speak on it, Coach, whether it's by position or just on basketball skill sets themselves.
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this question, Coach, and I talk to my assistants who do an unbelievable job trying to figure out what to nail it down. And ultimately, it comes back to a couple things, but the first is that I trust my gut, right? If you see a guy and he's playing well and in my gut, I just feel like I can evaluate well enough that we're going to do that. But when I look back at the guys that we have gotten that have really thrived, the one thing that I think has helped, and maybe this is a little bit more vague, and we can get back into specific basketball skill sets afterwards if you want, but I have found that we have had an incredible amount of success with guys that just have a chip on their shoulder. Guys that are told they're, 2 inches too short or a little bit too light or can't dunk consistently enough, or their foot speed is just a little bit too slow, or their shooting motion is a little too funky. And, for me, that really resonated. I was a guy who didn't play college basketball, and I'm certainly out here recruiting against plenty of people who did. But for me, getting the experience to, have to prove myself, I connect with the guys that also need to prove themselves. And so those guys that have a chip on their shoulder, I find makes us into, one of the toughest, hardest playing, smartest teams out there and gives us a huge leg up. So for me, all other things considered, and don't get me wrong, it's a bottom line business. We need talented players. Talented players make talented coaches in a lot of ways. But for me, the guys we've had success with and what I look for are guys that have a chip on their shoulder, because everyone else is overlooking them. And, that sort of goes to our whole philosophy of make it about the players. And we'll get into that later, I'm sure. But for me, if you have something to prove, you're going to fit. You're going to fit. And even the most talented guys have something to prove. I found that at every level. I'm sure you've experienced that even at NYU, Coach, where you're competing for national championships. But when you have guys that go out there every day with a mission, you're going to reach a high level of success. So for me, that's what I try to flesh out first.
Yeah, well, as I would kind of try to verbalize that, that would be like one of your non-negotiables. Like that's something
100%.
you want. Yeah, and so my question, like that I would return to you, or I would return to my assistants about a recruit, is that okay? So now we have this player who's got it. These guys all have chips on their shoulders. That's good, but now let's kind of measure them, and the basketball skill part is going to come into play then, because you want to find those that have the chip on their shoulder, but yet can really bring what to the table, Coach?
Right. So that's a great way to think about it. And so I think in the modern game, a lot of times shooting is the first thing people look for. For us, we look for one elite skill set. Elite skill set. I think too often people focus on the one thing that's preventing them from getting to the next level. Right? How many times have you heard, he'd be a Division I guy if?
Yeah.
You can spend time thinking about that, or you could spend time thinking about, well, he does have the best vision, out of ball screens that I've ever seen, or he does shoot it better than anybody I've ever seen, or he does, he guards one-on-one better than anybody I've ever seen. And so for us, we're looking for one elite skill.
Interesting, Coach. Yeah.
A really good example. Our second leading scorer last year was a freshman, and he's a guard who I can look in the eye, and me, Coach, I'm not towering over anybody, but what allowed Pat to do that is he shot 39% from three, and he's got range back to the half court line. Really empowered him to take those shots and fit into what we do, and he played fearlessly. And I think people might have said, we're going to pass on him because he's not big enough. Can he finish at the rim? Well, it doesn't matter if he can finish at the rim if he's hitting 40% from 28 feet, right?
Right.
So, our starting center last year averaged 2.1 block shots per game, which was best in our conference and fifth best among freshmen in Division III. And a lot of people looked at him and said, he's too skinny. He doesn't shoot it. He's not a stretch five. And I said, well, who cares? He's elite at this. And so for me, what I guess I'm coming back to, Coach, is I'm not a system coach. We're going to build our system around our personnel. So for me, we look for one elite skill, and we want to build off of that. And we really put a premium on player development. We spend a lot of time when we're allowed to doing that, and when we're not allowed to, giving the most legal tools that we can, and in terms of out of season, giving them the tools to be able to do it.
Right. And Coach, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I when you say you're not a system coach, I think you mean, or if I'm wrong, correct me, but it's not that you're married to one system. It's
Exactly.
creating a system, but that it fits your players and your personnel's strengths. Would that be correct?
Yeah, 100%. For example, my first year, we had an undersized center who was more of a converted wing. So we were running a lot of Princeton-style actions where we were giving him the ball in the high post and running hard cuts and backdoors and things off of him. You know, this year our bigs were a lot better in screen and dive situations, so we went to a much heavier pick and roll system, and you know, we ended up having a lot more depth this year. So we wanted to just play even faster and let our guards make decisions in transition and push it as much as possible. And we ended up scoring, you know, over 1.2 points per possession. I know I'm getting a little analytical here. I'm not trying to get too deep into the weeds, but for me, letting go and not trying to control it too much was the best thing that we could have done. So you're 100% right, Coach. We're going to tailor our system around our guys' strengths and weaknesses. And, you know, if we have guys who can shoot, great. That'll be worked into it. If we have guys who can't shoot, great. We'll figure out a drive and kick sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just that I'm in agreement with it, Coach. It's really how I existed in my tenure at NYU. It's what I grew to believe would be most effective. You know, because over my tenure in 30 years, I ran, you know, a number of different systems. You know, I had probably, I think it was 3 different kind of tenures of running Princeton, you know, either 3 or 4 years at a clip based on our personnel.
Right.
You know, we ran various different, you know, systems that were kind of fit to the players we had. And like I like to tell the story, and I've told this on a couple of the other shows, but you know, my last NCAA team in 2016.
That was a great team, Coach. That was a really good team.
Yeah, they were a really good team, and so I like to tell the guys who talk about shooting so much, which I am in agreement with, the importance of shooting in today's game. But we lost in the second round at Christopher Newport by 3 points. They went to the Final Four. It was a nip and tuck game all the way. For the game, Coach, we took 3 threes for the game.
You had a couple great bigs, and the high-low stuff you ran that year was unbelievable, Coach.
Yeah, because obviously that's what they could do. But we took 3 threes, and 2 of the threes that we took were in the last minute. One of them was like a desperation 3 to try to tie it, like with a couple of, a few seconds to go. So think about that, an entire game.
That's unbelievable.
Today's game. But again, speaking to kind of, what you said, and is that in Division III, let's face it, I don't care what level you play at in Division III, we are still always looking to bring in the best players that are a fit, whether it be the intangibles or the tangibles, and that is going to change. We can't pass up this player because he doesn't shoot well enough. If he's a monster on the boards and he plays super hard and he's got all the qualities we want, intangibly speaking, we can't turn our back on those kids if they want to be a part of it, as you know. So thus
100%.
The systems change. Yeah,
definitely. Flexibility, I think, is hopefully the key to being a good coach.
Great. Well, I know you're off to a good start with the Coach. That's a great year for you. I'm excited for you kind of going forward. So now, Coach, you've with all the experience that you've had as a head coach and then also at other Division III programs, for you now, talk about how you've navigated, and you've been at good academic institutions prior to even at Pratt. Talk to me about how you've been able to assist your players during the season when it's really challenging and kind of balancing their academic responsibilities and their, basketball schedule.
It's a challenge, Coach, and I'm sure you've gone through the same thing. But, I think that a lot of coaches talk about being an academic first institution, and we do the same thing. And so for me, it was really, really important to follow through on what we said. And it's sometimes harder to do that than others. right? Based on what kids are studying or based on what time classes are. But for what that means for us is that if we're really going to put academics first, we're going to put our full weight and power behind that. So we don't determine our practice schedules during the year until we have our players' class schedules.
Mm-hmm.
And we work our practice schedules around the class schedules, because a non-negotiable is you do not miss class for practice.
Right.
And then, when we try to schedule our games, we're not putting 3-hour road trips on a Wednesday night, because that's just not fair to someone who wants to thrive in the classroom as well as on the court. So we're going to be strategic. And one thing that I got pretty good at this year in our scheduling was not making the mistake of scheduling back-to-back Tuesday night games or Monday night games. So guys are not missing the same class. That's a nuance that I wasn't 100% sure about my first.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Great point.
It's become a little bit of a cat and mouse game, but it's fun, right? It's become fun at that point. And I think the guys appreciate it. And the other thing that we do, we get the question a lot, oh, do you have academic support services? Do you have tutors for the players? And what I like to explain is, we almost never need to get to a tutor, because what our system is, coach, is we're going to get the syllabi for anybody who's a freshman or anybody who's struggled in the past or we could potentially see as struggling as an upperclassman. We're going to get the syllabi for that class. And what that allows us to do is to ask meaningful questions. How many times have you asked a player, how's that class going? Good, fine, right? And so I got tired of hearing that, and I got to give Joe Riley at Wesleyan a lot of credit for this, because he's a great mentor of mine who taught me a lot about handling the academic side of things. And so what we do is we're able to look at the syllabus and say, you have a test coming up in 2 weeks. Have you started studying? Did you get the grade back on this assignment? Mm-hmm. And if a player's struggling, what we want to do is determine why they're struggling, right? We want to be solution-based instead of problem-based. So I find that most of the time, it's not because they're struggling with the material, it's because they're struggling with the time and the time management. So just saying, go see a tutor, go see a tutor, go see a tutor, that's actually counterproductive, because it ends up taking up even more time that they could have been studying. So what we're going to do is we're going to get that person access to our Learning Access Center, where they can work with time management specialists. But then on the other side of things, if it is a content issue and they're struggling, now we're going to start talking about professors' office hours. We don't really have a lot of TAs, but we're going to do extra help sessions. And then ultimately, okay, now we can start going to tutors or the writing center. But we like the personalized help approach first. And in my 3 years, it's never gotten beyond the need to go to a professor's office hours, because our faculty is absolutely tremendous. And they want people to succeed. And that's the key.
Sounds like a great plan you have in place, Coach.
Thank you. Yeah, we're trying. We're very lucky. We're very lucky to have good kids as well. That helps.
Absolutely. And Coach, as we move into this time of the year now, I know this year is not the norm, but what would be like the typical off season, for your team and your coaches?
Well, for us, we want to be in touch with our guys, but we want to give them some space too. I think the reason that a lot of these guys chose to go Division III and really appreciate the Division III experience is because that balance that they can achieve. They don't want to feel like we own them. They don't want to feel like they're on a schedule and, they have to check in at 6 a.m. every Saturday in July to prove that they ran however many miles or got however many shots up. And that's not my style either, because to me, that's not people who are internally motivated. That's guys who are externally motivated, but whole nother discussion. So for me, we want to give our guys all the tools, but we want to give them freedom within those tools. So Derek Spinellis, who's my top assistant, is one of the best player development and individual skill development coaches that I've ever been around. So I really let him take the reins on it. We collaborate on stuff like that. And what we want to do is we work individually with all of our players to set up a plan that works for them. Okay. In terms of lifting and strength and conditioning, basketball skill development. And then the third key component that's been huge for us is nutrition, because a lot of people don't really think about that, especially at our level. And we wanted to spend a lot of time focusing on that. My coaches and I, we're going to be on the road. We're going to be on the road recruiting. We trust our eye and our gut, like I said. But our most important recruits are the guys that are on campus. So we're continue maintaining those relationships with them. And, some recruits will say, well, coach, how come you're spending more time on them than me? And what I like to say is, in 2 years, when you're one of our guys, you're going to really appreciate that.
Right.
And the feedback has been that exactly. So we encourage them to do that. We encourage them to get jobs, internships, specifically paid internships. We have some guys that, unfortunately, this whole pandemic is throwing things off a little bit, but we had a couple guys that had some spectacular stuff lined up that they were really excited for. And we want guys to do that because eventually the ball stops bouncing. And if we can help put them in position to succeed in life, that's what we're all about anyway.
Yeah. Coach, this information I think is really invaluable that you're providing. I know our audience is really going to benefit, from having this additional information on Pratt. Certainly, I think as the word continues to grow about Pratt and, the possibilities that are out there for students that may be a good match with the majors that you offer.
Definitely.
I know there are going to be kids out there across the board that, you're going to come in contact with, and then it's just about getting them to pull the trigger and say that this is the right place for me. So, Coach, this has been great. I certainly appreciate your time. I look forward to when we can meet up face to face, but I'll certainly take I'll take that we can spend this time together talking basketball and learning more about Pratt.
This was a treat, Coach. Not only do I get to talk about one of my favorite things in the whole world, Pratt basketball, but I get to do it with you. So thank you for thinking of me, and I appreciate you including us. And I look forward to answering any questions anybody has because I have a whole lot more stuff. I'm really proud of where I work and what I believe in. So I'm excited to share it with everybody.
Great. Thanks so much, Coach, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Take care, Coach.
You too.